Here we are. I love every other Tuesday morning hopping on here and having these heart calls with you. It's so fun. And it's always a really creative thing to think about, what do I want to talk about this time? So the topic I'm excited to bring to you today is performative boundaries. Performative boundaries. Now, there are a lot of different ways I could have labeled this call because it could be fear-based boundaries, it could be perception-based boundaries. There's a lot of different ways to talk about this, but at the core of what I'm trying to talk about here is the ways that we bend what our sort of natural or instinctual or genuine boundaries would be, where we bend those based on how we want others to see us. And so I'm calling this performative boundaries because we tend to be performing an identity that we think is going to somehow gain us safety, love, belonging, approval. And a lot of us don't even realize that we're living from this place. I mean, this is like one of the main reasons that someone reaches out to me for coaching around boundaries. It's like, I don't even realize when I have stopped living in my genuine boundary or that I haven't been doing that. And then, I'm just finding myself burned out or deeply resentful or feeling like I'm living someone else's life, So the first thing to say about these performative boundaries when we're sort of betraying what our genuine boundary would be in order to be perceived in a certain positive light by the people around us, is that this is a coping pattern. We don't just do this for the fun of it. It's not intentionally manipulative in most cases. It is a coping pattern that we internalized from our childhood, most of us, that says, I can't have the needs I have to have the needs that fit into the picture of who my caregivers need me to be. I can't have the experience I'm having. I have to have the experience that I think people want me to be having to be easy to be around or part of a cohesive family unit or whatever that was, whatever that looked like, right? So we learn from a very young age, a lot of us, and it's not even conscious, who we have to be to sort of fit into the flow of how life is in whatever family unit or social context we came up in. And by the way, this is bigger than family too. This is also the systems we live in, right? And how we have to adapt to the systems of oppression, for example, that we're trying to exist within. So we develop coping patterns that are actually self-protective, right? Like, oh, I know that if I have, X, Y, and Z needs, it's going to be more difficult for my caregivers, or I'm going to get pushback from the people around me. And I don't want to have to deal with that, right? It's too much for my nervous system to deal with. I don't have the tools and the skills at a young age to be able to process my grief or process my anger. I'm relying on my caregivers and the adults in my life to help me do that. And if I'm doing things that are challenging for them, well, they're not going to be there for me, right? So it's self-protective. We're trying to look out for ourselves on an unconscious level. But what it morphs into over time is this sort of chronic, low level, and sometimes not so low level, self-betrayal, leaving behind our truth, where the true boundary would be, to try to protect this image of who we think we need to be for others so that we get our core needs met. But what happens is, in our early lives, the conditions within which our core needs could be met were pretty firm. They were firmly placed, right? Like we were in a particular family unit or particular social context. And as we grow and we become independent, we have more autonomy. We have the ability to choose different social contexts, most of us. Not across the board, but most of us and most of the people who are engaging with my work and reaching out to me for coaching have this autonomy. We can choose our social context. We can choose the relationships we want to be in or not. In many cases, we can even choose the career path that we're pursuing, right? And so when we have this autonomy, we have the ability to choose social contexts where the same restrictions aren't in place around who we have to be to get our needs met. But we haven't consciously realized that those conditions from childhood are no longer active, and that we have that freedom. So we end up kind of banging our head against the wall, still enacting the same limitations from our early lives with, in most cases, people who really want our well-being and want our truth and want our authenticity in our present day lives. And then it ends up being this sort of self-sabotaging pattern where we're betraying this sense of what's true for us, where our genuine yes would be. We're overextending, we're people pleasing, we're enabling ourselves in this performative boundary setting that doesn't actually give the people in our lives a chance to know who we really are, what we really need, and how we can thrive. So one of the things I wanted to do is to share an example of one of the performative boundaries that was kind of a wake-up call in my life, because I have a long history of grappling and trying to transform these performative tendencies, because I had some strong conditioning for who I was and the time and place that I came up in around I need to be easygoing, I need to be accommodating, I need to be generous, I need to be giving. And this personality structure has been, it's taken years to really unpack it, look underneath it, figure out where that came from, rewire it, and then really trust this new paradigm that I can have my genuine boundaries. And not only will it be okay, it will be better than the results I was getting with my performative boundaries. So I remember there was kind of this turning point. There was a time when a colleague was coming in from overseas to participate in a workshop that I was sort of co-leading with another facilitator. And this person was coming in from very far away. They're going to have to go through customs on their way in. And at the time, I just thought, oh, well, I can clearly go get this person from the airport. They're taking so much trouble on their end to make it into the country, and they're flying all these hours to get here. Of course, I can just go pick them up. So I reorganized my schedule that day. I, planned to have this time to go get this person. And I showed up at the airport. And also, it was the day after Trump had been elected in the US as president. So it was I would say, a traumatic day for me personally. There was major whiplash and emotional process going on for me, and just like, what even happened? So I was already in a low resource place emotionally, just like dealing with that first day. Maybe it wasn't the first day, maybe it was a couple days after, but it was recent. So there was a lot stirring for me. I show up at the airport, and then this person is not arriving. Like, I see that their flight has landed. I can't figure out what's going on. And I end up waiting in the airport for more than an hour. And this whole time, I'm starting to build all this resentment. Why did they expect me to come get them from the airport? What were they thinking? What was I thinking? And just really starting to stew in my frustration and my resentment. But I felt very justified in it. I was sort of like, I'm being this good person trying to come to a good thing. And, what's going on with them that they're not showing up? And then finally, maybe an hour and a half later, they come through, and, they've had a really hard day. Like, it's been a really long day of travel. They didn't have a way of reaching me because their cell phone didn't work in this country. Customs was kind of a nightmare, and they're coming through, and like, they're looking to me to be this sort of like, soft landing place. Like, oh, I finally see Erin, right? And I'm sitting there just full of resentment and frustration, and I'm emotionally fragile from the election results. And I managed to sort of like limp my way through this interaction using all of my conditioning, right? My performative generosity. Oh, that must have been so hard, right? But inside, the whole time, I'm feeling deeply resentful and so justified in my resentment, and just like why can't this person even grasp the magnitude of the sacrifice I've made to come get them, right? I canceled sessions with clients to come do this, and they're not even apologizing. That was my main thing. I was so resentful. They're not even apologizing for being late, right? So I said I felt so justified in this experience. And then, in the hours following, I got some support from some people in my life who cared about me at the time. And it was a major reality check. They were like, so why did you say yes to going to get this person? Couldn't they have gotten the light rail to like a station where you could pick them up? And, you couldn't predict, neither of you could have predicted. It wasn't really their place to apologize to you for something that's out of their control, and they started to unpack this with me. And at the very core of it, what it came down to, what I had to own, was that I had not set a genuine boundary in my offer to come get them from the airport. It wasn't in my emotional capacity. I was dealing with a lot. I really actually needed some rest and some space and some downtime during a busy week to actually just feel the impact of what had gone on politically in my country. I didn't have, it wasn't joyful for me to give up certain sessions. At the time, I was really like needing every session that was coming in. And I was like, that was important to have that work. And I was, betraying that need for some financial security just to be perceived as a generous host. So I share this example with you because it was such a reality check for me around how I had fallen into, without even realizing it, a performative boundary that was not only emotionally damaging for me, but also damaging for the trust in the relationship. And this is not someone that I had a close relationship with. It's not someone that I'm in regular contact with now. So it wasn't like we had a big process around this or anything. But in those closer relationships, this is the kind of boundary that over time really damages trust. Because if I can't be trusted to say what's true for me, and then I'm going to hold resentment and hold frustration and hold a sense of entitlement that they need to somehow caretake my needs because I've done all these favors, that is a really sticky dynamic that can be very difficult to repair once it goes, years unattended. So I share this example so you might see yourself in it in some way in your life to really grasp that performative boundary, what that can look like, how justified we can feel in that. It often comes with a sense of victimhood and justification, self-justification, entitlement for our needs to be seen and taken care of in return, when really we haven't come from a very clean, grounded place where we are in touch with what our real boundary is and willing to stand up for it. Now, we're almost out of time on today's call. There's so much more I could say. In fact, I feel like I could give an entire workshop just on this, but I will summarize here that if you find yourself setting performative boundaries without even realizing it, that you are subtly but chronically abandoning your truth and setting the boundaries you think will help you be perceived in a positive light, the first step is going to be to understand that this is a coping pattern, to have self-compassion for this coping pattern, and to start to unpack who it is you think you have to be for others and where that may have come from. Because it's usually harkening back to some wounding that we carry from our childhood, who we had to be, who we couldn't be, right? And to start to close this gap between who we had to be and who we really are is a deep and sacred healing process. And it's a process that I would be honored to support and guide you through, whether that is with private coaching or my Boundaries Without Backlash program that's coming this fall. So you can learn more about that. I'll put the links in the show notes here. But I just want to reassure you that there is a path of healing around this. And it's usually nonlinear, but there are some pretty amazing guiding principles that can help us start to heal that gap between who we think we have to be and how we have to be perceived and who we really are, and growing our courage to be who we really are. And as I said, to start embracing that maybe the results of being who we really are and having the boundaries that are true for us could actually even produce more happiness and well-being than living from this place of who we think we have to be. And I'm living proof sitting here today to tell you it can be even better than you think it can be to live from those true boundaries. And the most crucial piece of this is learning how to have a truly grounded energy as we sink into the boundaries we really need and start to bring them in our life. And for that, I have an extensive program that I can support you, and that's my Boundaries Without Backlash program. So check it out if this is resonating with you. Thank you so much for being here today on this Heart Call. I hop on every other Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific for about 16 minutes, and I riff on a topic that is alive in my life that's showing up, that I have some ideas about how you might live with more courage, kindness, and authenticity, and give you some tips or some steps that you might take to try to embrace what I'm talking about here today. If you are enjoying these calls, if you're showing up and the topics are resonating with you, please share them far and wide. Share them with other people in your life that you think they would resonate with, because I always love seeing our community grow. And it's a great way for people to learn about my work and see if I might be a fit to help them on their journey of living with more courage and kindness and authenticity. All right, folks, I will stick around for a minute or two to answer any questions or hear your shares if you have them. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next Heart Call.